Hi, I would like to invite one of the wonderful futurists today to have a short interview. Today, my guest is Jason Schenker, the chairman of a Futurist Institute. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Alex. Thanks for inviting me to be here today.
Today, we would like to have our very short interview. Before we go with the questions in further, can you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. I'm Jason Schenker. I'm chairman of the Futurist Institute. I'm also the president of Prestige Economics. I've authored numerous books, including The Future After COVID, and it is my pleasure to speak with you, Alex.
So, Jason, I'd like to give you the three questions of you. We face the era of social and economic uncertainty. The Russia-Ukraine war, the side effect of COVID-19, logistics chaos, and inflation, interest rates rise, and oil price rise, etc. As everything is uncertain, and the importance of the risk management is increased, but it is also the questionable whether the risk management is possible. So, as a futurist, what process do you use to derive the outlook of each field of the society? And how reliable can we be about your outlook?
Thank you very much for that question, Alex. I think the most important thing as I'm looking at uncertainty in the future is to try to identify historical trends, try to see where we've seen similar things happen before, and then try to identify immutable long-term dynamics we might agree on as consistent realities. There are many things that are headlines and some important things that are trend line. I'm always looking at what is the reality in which we're operating, what are the long-term trends that are unlikely to change, and then look at what would we need to believe for a different set of outcomes to happen. And that's usually how I derive what I expect to be the most likely scenario, by looking at the trend lines, looking at the reality of the current situation, and then trying to consider what seems most believable or least likely given those conditions.
Right. I think that you are forecasting or the outlooks is based on various data. So where did you get the data from?
There are many different kinds of data I'm looking for to identify both trend lines and headlines. When I look at the trends, there's a lot of economic data. We see different cycles. We see interest rates. All of those things we've seen play out in various permutations before. And those are the important data as we think about economic risk. But we also know that the Russian war on Ukraine is a relatively unique situation, but we know it's not insular. We know it's not singular. In fact, as I look around at a comparable situation, unfortunately, I think of the Korean War. This month in June of 2022 will turn 72 years old and is still technically ongoing. As I look at the future of Russia and Ukraine, I think there's a potential that this goes from a very severe conflict to armistice with a division, and you end up with essentially two regions or two countries. And as I think about what's happened with the Republic of Korea in those last 72 years, I'm actually optimistic about what the future of Ukraine could be if this does become a frozen conflict. Because just because there is a severe war, just because there is a frozen conflict and a war that's still technically ongoing, doesn't mean the economy can't thrive, doesn't mean there can't be advances. In fact, the Republic of Korea shows there can be tremendous economic growth and development and advancement and really big impact and positive opportunities. So I do think that that frozen conflict situation, which we have seen in Korea, I think we're likely to see something like that in Ukraine. But this is the sort of thing I'm looking for, something that looks a little bit what we're seeing as a situation now, but we've seen it in the past. And there's a saying by the American author Mark Twain, history doesn't repeat itself, but sometimes it rhymes. And along those lines, economists and futurists alike often say, this time is never different. And so finding those things where we see motifs playing out again and again is what I'm always looking for as a futurist, because we have seen patterns repeat over time.
Thank you, Jason. It is interesting and impressive. I would like to go to the second question. As you know, the interest in economic outlook is probably higher than ever because we live in the uncertainty. And in Korea, stock prices have been steadily declined in the first half of the year. And we faced Black Monday yesterday. So outlook for the global economy is likely to leak, as seen by the recent plunge in the cryptocurrency of the Terra. As you see in the news, the Terra crushed it. And the Ethereum and the Bitcoin is radically weakness. So what risk factors can you cite for the global economy? How do you view this year's economic growth?
Sure. This is a very tough question, Alex. I know it's on the top of a lot of people's minds right now. I'm very concerned about the economy. I think the most disconcerting issue is the rise in interest. There's a lot of inflation. We see out of the United States, the U.S. Federal Reserve raising interest rates, talking about raising them more and more and more. And that kind of risk weighs on equity markets. It also drives up bond yields and pushes bond prices down. The rise in bond yields is particularly worrisome in emerging markets and low-income developing countries. As for cryptocurrency, that's a riskier asset. Remember doing a TV interview with a Korean news show not too long ago about this. It is a risky asset class compared to equities or real estate. And as we see now, with a rise in interest rates, investors want to go to things that are a little bit more secure. And so they're moving away from the riskier asset. Now, as interest rates go up, it is possible that we could see equity markets remain under pressure, come under more pressure. The same thing's true in crypto. We could even see real estate markets come under pressure as well, because when interest rates go up, we see business activity slow. And with that rise in the cost of money, that's something decreases estimates of future cash flows for businesses, especially if we see interest rates remain high for a long time. Interest rates are rising globally. Inflation is high. Globally, financial markets are under pressure. But if I try to disaggregate trend line from the headline, I'm still optimistic about the Korean economy because of the importance of ICT industries. That's not going away. And trade conflicts and the challenge, the great power competition between the US and China, that could remain quite hot. And as there are concerns about that, that might represent opportunities for Korean ICT industries to grow. So I'm a bit more optimistic about Korea than many other economies. The economies that are focused on where there's opportunity and making sure to try to limit those downside risks, that's going to be important, especially with all this uncertainty.
Thank you, Jason. I also hope to believe you're optimistic on the Korean market, but I still worry about we might face some cold autumn this year because of the oil prices, and the interest rate is still raised until the end of this year in Korean Central Bank too.
One other thing I'd add on that, Alex, one thing we see out of the United States is consumer confidence here recently fell very hard. And by that, there's a data series going back to 1952. We got 70 years of data. We have the lowest level on record for the University of Michigan Confidence Index.
Right.
Oil prices, while they're high right now, if we see a significant drop down in economic growth, the outlook for oil prices becomes less certain.
Okay, Jason, and I'd like to go to the last and third question. So recently, Korea has very high interest in the smart cities, and also export is the solution to other countries and the cities. In case of the smart cities, the problems due to the concentration of urban population and limited goods and energy, and also the conflict between the various stakeholders. And these problems are solved based on the technology. So what is your outlook on smart cities? What's your expectations for the Korean smart cities?
This is a tremendous question. Smart cities are very important. We see a bigger push towards sustainability, and that's really about managing the resources we have. The pressures that cities all over the world are under now is only going to increase in the decades ahead. And as it does, we all want to feel that we live in a world of abundance. But the truth is, with so many demands on natural resources and more people moving to cities, it's going to be a challenge. And the only way you stretch those resources so that it feels abundant is with smart city technology, using technology to optimize the assets that exist, optimize resource utilization, and to really just take what you have and make it go further. So I'm very optimistic about the need for smart cities, and seeing Korea really take the lead on this is very important. I think for Korea, it presents tremendous opportunities. In Korea, seeing the smart city push there makes me optimistic that not only will we see more smart cities, but that very likely we're going to see a lot of the technologies, innovations, and discoveries, realizations, practicalities of smart cities evolve in Korea, be applied elsewhere.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in August and speaking at the event as well.
Thank you.